Airplane pilots of Reddit, what was your biggest we're all fucked up moment that you survived and your passengers didn't notice? Commercial pilot here, not the most exciting story, but because there aren't any good ones yet, I'll reply. I was flying myself and 3 passengers over the Appalachian Mountain on a clear day. We hit some mild turbulence, and the door opened to the cabin. The passengers all started panicking, so I basically said, "Chill out guys, this happens all the time," and tried closing the door. I couldn't get it shut while also flying the plane, so I simply landed at a nearby airfield and closed it on the ground. After the trip was over, I told the passengers that was the first time that had ever happened to me, and I was slightly panicked as well. That's quite handy if you need to reverse after taking a wrong turning during the flight or something. It's way easier to put the plane in reverse. This way, the engine absorbs the fuel you've been consuming while going the wrong way, and you don't run the risk of running dry mid-flight. Also, you're running the odometer backwards, meaning the plane is actually getting newer and therefore more valuable. I should try this on my friend's dad's Ferrari next time I skip school. Uncoordinated turn, and all the fuel went to one side of the plane. Choked both engines, sputtered and cut out. 3,000 feet high, so brought back the coordination and pointed down a bit. They started back up. Yikes. Edit. Well, this got some attention. Some clarifying points. First, not an airline pilot. I'm an aerial photo pilot. Had one passenger, the camera operator, and he didn't notice, but to be fair, he was pretty into his podcast. Second, it was intentional to be uncoordinated. We use skidding turns to turn 180 degrees faster, so we can get one line and collect more pictures. Third, it was a light twin, we were lowish on fuel, and that's what enabled the airplane to be starved of fuel. Under normal circumstances this would not have happened. Okay. Clear skies. Adios. Yikes. A nearly perfect setup for a spin at a low altitude. I've heard spinning is a good trick. Now this is pod racing. I've got a bad feeling about this. Yippee. This was about 7 years ago now. I took my brother and 2 cousins up for a short sightseeing flight one morning in a Cessna 172. I knew there was some weather coming in, so I wanted to get it over with quickly. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the clouds getting worse, and then some lightning off in the distance. Definitely time to head back. Heading back, I radioed my intentions. Uncontrolled airport but with an FBO, and someone radioed back with the current winds. It didn't compute what they said, and in retrospect I should have asked for clarification. Get back to the airport, and as I'm on final, I realize just how bad the wind is. Having a hard time keeping on centerline and eventually go around on the first try. By now I'm starting to sweat bullets, and planning on rerouting if the next attempt doesn't go well. I make sure to turn the intercom off, so my cousins in the back can't hear how panicked I'm becoming, though I did keep my cool through the whole thing. On second attempt, I've got the rudder pegged to the left and managed to get the wheels on the ground safely. I taxi to park, shut down, jump out, and start shaking with adrenaline and let out a huge sigh of relief. Cousins had no idea what just happened, it was just an exciting flight to them. My brother kind of knew what was going on, and I let him in on what I was thinking later. Apparently, I had an audience of guys from the FBO watching me as well, probably yelling at me to go somewhere else. I'm honestly surprised sometimes I managed that landing with no incidents, especially since that was basically my first crosswind landing. Well, what were the winds? How much crosswind does it take to run out of rudder in a 172? A lot. I've landed in a 20-knot crosswind, and even then I didn't run out of rudder. Man, some English would be pretty cool right about now. Wind fast. Plane shaky. Ooh, I see. Shaky no good, make tilt. Big tilt bad. Plane go boom? Edit. This is the most stupidest post I've made to get so many upvotes. What's wrong with you people? Plane go turned. Edit. Who gilded this? Why say a lot word when few do trick? This whole single thread made me laugh so hard. Once, departing Burning Man with a couple of passengers, my engine conked out. I didn't even follow the engine out checklist. I glanced at the fuel pressure gauge, didn't like what I saw, hit the switch for the auxiliary fuel pump, and it came back to life. The whole incident was over so fast the passengers never even noticed. I wouldn't call it a we're all fucked moment though. Worst case scenario, I would have had to set it back down on the playa, which is pretty flat terrain as far as the eye can see. Redundancy. High five. 2 is 1, 1 is none. I was in the process of getting my PPL, private pilot license, and I was flying circuits solo. Before I took off, the CFO of the flight school asked me if I was sure it was a good idea to fly. It's pretty windy. I was flying a Cessna 152 on a day with wind pushing 15 kts and turbulence around 20. I honestly don't know what I, or anyone at the flight school was thinking, letting me, 16 years old, take off. Anyways, a few bumpy circuits go by with no problem. I actually got some great practice landing in turbulence. So the last circuit of the day, I'm on final with full flaps doing the absolute minimum speed for approach in a 152, not taking into consideration that the air is super turbulent. For those who don't know, when it's bumpy you should be going a little faster on approach than usual. Anyways, I'm quite close to the ground, maybe 300 to 400 feet, and I can hear the wind blowing over, the sound of the engine. Suddenly, no wind. I had just lost 15 to 20 kts of almost direct headwind on final approach, with absolutely no airspeed to spare. I remember my shirt sleeves looked like they were inflating, and the plane's stall warning started screaming at me. The controls became totally useless, like a limp computer joystick. Thankfully, I had my hand on the throttle like my instructor taught me, and for whatever instinctual reason, good instructor probably, I gently pushed the throttle all the way and slightly lowered the nose. All of this took place in the span of about 5 seconds. I remember what I did, but not thinking about doing it. It was like when you drive somewhere, and you suddenly realize you've arrived without remembering driving. Damn scary. Anyways, I landed the plane just fine and went home and took a nap. My parents said I was pale as a ghost when I got home. Flying is fun until it isn't. This entire story occurred in less than 10 seconds, and should have ended with headlines on CNN. Military pilot and not commercial, but it still could have ended in a disaster. Flying a CH-47D Chinook helicopter in Iraq, mid-July 2008, when the temp was over 130 degrees. Packed full with 36 passengers, at an altitude of only 100 feet and speed of 140 knots, lower and faster than you'd ever fly in the US. We hit a thermal pocket of warm air that pushed us up, so I nosed the cyclic, looks like a joystick between your legs, forward to maintain altitude. I was a brand new pilot, flying with a combat vet who wanted me to maintain altitude of 100 feet almost exactly, so no higher than 120 or lower than 80 feet. Nosing the aircraft down kept us from going higher, but we immediately hit a downdraft and the aircraft started to fall like a rock. I pulled back on the cyclic as hard as I could to get the nose up, but it hit my body armor and wouldn't go back any further. I watched the altimeter drop all the way to 19 feet, and miraculously, we started falling and began to climb at the last possible second. During the debrief, the other pilot, now one of my closest friends, who had well over 1,000 combat hours, told me he's never been so close to dying before. I wasn't shook up until I heard that. Even typing this today gives me chills. Not completely on topic, but I was an aircraft mechanic for the Navy back in the day on A4 Skyhawks. Student pilot notices his canopy light is on, indicating his canopy isn't all the way closed and locked. He decided it might help if he cracked the canopy open just a little bit and close it again. I remember seeing it land as a convertible. We sent a couple of guys out in a pickup truck, where they found the missing canopy in a farmer's field. The submarine door doesn't seem closed all the way. Jim, do you mind opening it and slamming it shut so we know it's closed? The submarine door doesn't seem closed all the way. You jest, but I just finished reading The Silent Service in World War II, which is a book with a series of short anecdotes from USN submariners about their experiences during the war. An incorrectly shut hatch, causing major problems for a diving submarine, happened in more than one story in the book. 56% of pilots admit falling asleep during flight, whilst 29% admit they woke up to their co-pilot asleep too. I'm willing to bet those are just the pilots who are honest about it, and the number is much higher. That's kind of disconcerting, but realistically that shouldn't scare you very much. The plane is flying itself. The pilots are just monitoring, and if anything changes, alarms are going to go off like crazy, which would probably wake up a pilot. Now, if they didn't wake up to an alert, that would be terrifying. An ATC controller falling asleep could cause much more damage. Not a pilot but a passenger was on a 16-seater turboprop when suddenly there's a loud bang. All the lights go out, and we drop. We're all looking around like, what's going on? Is this how we die? After a few minutes, the lights come back on, and the pilot comes in. The PA says, "Sorry about that folks, but we were just struck by lightning. No need to worry, everything seems to be working. Except for the radar, it's fried." I may have worried a little. Believe it or not, that actually happens pretty regularly. It's usually not a big deal. Planes are designed with that in mind. Yeah, happened in a plane I was in, and I don't even fly that often. It's basically a loud bang, super bright flash from outside, and the lights turn off and on again. About 1 year ago, right before the school bus left my bus stop, lightning struck the stop sign right next to where I was sitting. I'm only 16, but wow.